I think if you've been following this channel for a while, I don't necessarily do tons of poll analysis. I probably was doing it in the primary every month or so. And I think one of the reasons for that is the polling agencies themselves, I would say, often are completely clueless as to who to focus on. If you go to a state, let's say Arizona, and you go to the metro Phoenix area, and that's where you focus a lot of the polling, I think that you're going to obviously get the largest part of the state more accurate. But the state of Arizona, remember, I mean, it's huge. It's got a lot of counties that are pretty deserted. But there are counties where there's a huge aggregation of people in certain areas, especially the border counties. And people are generally in those, they might have stronger opinions than people in the Metro Phoenix area. So that's the way that I think people get lost in the forest when they talk about polling. And there's a show on the Hill that really focuses in my opinion, way too much on polls, and that is Rising with Krystal and Saagar. And I'm not saying this because I don't think you should watch the show. I think that the show is interesting, and I think that they have a good dynamic between the two, Krystal Ball and Saagar and Jetty, but they are beholden to polls. And I think one of the reasons for this might be that they are using these polls as a way to grab attention for viewers, because most of the audience does come from YouTube, and they need a way to get viewers to tune in and take a look at what they're talking about. But I wouldn't say that that's the only problem. The other problem is that you're talking about two people who would consider themselves populists from the left and the right. And most of what they're talking about is what policy is popular with voters, as opposed to what policy is actually going to work. And all they're talking about day after day is the need for general strikes and for raising the minimum wage and all sorts of solutions that are very big government heavy. And I understand that in this day and age, that might be a little bit more of what's needed than was needed back in 2012 or in 2004, right? I don't think that in 2004, when the main issue was the Iraq war, I don't think that raising the minimum wage was really the big issue. So I think that they're certainly focused on some topics that have been ignored, but they think that elections are going to hinge entirely on things like this. Well, they have to, in my opinion, divorce themselves from this dependency on polls. So I think this one was from today, with Saagar and Jetty reacting to a poll.
All right, Saagar, what's on your radar?
Well, there is a major warning sign for President Donald Trump's re-election in a new national poll released by Quinnipiac. One of the surest signs yet that the current approach to the handling of the coronavirus crisis will spell disaster for the re-election efforts of the GOP in the Senate and the White House. The poll shows Biden at 50% with Trump at 39%. Granted, this poll has always been particularly unfavorable to Trump, with him never having been above a 7-point margin in the last 10 months. But it was the crosstab numbers in that poll that spelled particular alarm for me. Voters believe Biden would do a better job on coronavirus by a 16-point margin. And on the crucial question of who will do a better job bringing back the American economy, Biden leads Trump with a slim margin of 48% to 47%. This is especially noteworthy because, as you all know from our discussions with the Trump campaign on this show, they are betting that focusing on the economy is the best path to re-election. Now, before this particular poll, nearly every poll release showed voters saying they trusted Trump more on the economy. In this same poll, even in April, Trump led Biden by 49% to 44% on that particular question. So you can see the significant slide against him on the topic that is most likely to dominate the discussion come November. Now, you pair this polling alongside razor-tight Senate races in places like Montana, Kansas, and Arizona, other GOP states, not to mention even the traditional swing states, and we have a very big problem on our hands. The diagnosis is simple. It was never inevitable. This is a direct result of the nearly month-and-a-half-long delay now in the passage of a large fiscal response plan as advocated for.
Okay, I want to stop it there. So a lot of this is going into a lot of, essentially that this poll spells doom. Oh my God, this is Quinnipiac, 12-point lead for Joe Biden. Let me show you some Quinnipiac polls that have come out in the past. Sorry, I'm using the stylus again because I still don't have batteries for my mouse. So you have Biden. This was from November 11th, 2019. Biden holds slight lead in New Hampshire Democratic primary. Quinnipiac University poll finds 54% definitely wouldn't vote for Bloomberg in the primary. What was the result? Now remember, so you might think I'm cherry picking here, but the New Hampshire primary was only 3 months away at the time, and Biden didn't come even close to first place. He came in 5th place in New Hampshire with 8.4%. And there were no, to my knowledge, reported irregularities in New Hampshire. And the fact is that that was a state that apparently Quinnipiac thought that Biden would win, right? What's another? We'll get to that one later. You have November 5th, 2018, Bill Nelson has a 7-point lead in Florida Senate race. Quinnipiac University poll finds. So this was a mere, 2-3 days before the election. And it also said that Andrew Gillum was up 7 points in the governor's race in Florida. So let's look at the Florida gubernatorial election of 2018. Well, Andrew Gillum, he lost by a razor-thin margin. Razor-thin margin a day later, that shows that the poll was bunk. It shows that, so you have Quinnipiac basically releasing junk polls. That's what I take out of this. Okay, I'm not going to look at the margin of error, but I'm assuming that the margin of error was less than 7%. So let's go look at the Senate race from that year. Sorry. This is not the best way to shoot a video, but there's not much else I can do today about that. The Florida Senate race from that year also showed that Rick Scott defeated Bill Nelson by a razor-thin margin. And it would have been probably a larger margin if it wasn't for what they never talk about on the Hill, which was the crazy vote rigging in Broward County in favor of the Democrats. And those are the things that polls can't capture. I want people to understand. Polls can't capture voter irregularity. So the focus on polling is in many cases a huge waste of time, because if you're a Democrat and you believe that there's huge voter suppression by GOP and Chris Kobach or whatever, then stop believing the polls, because you probably believe that the GOP looks through your envelope, and if they see that you marked D's, they're going to put it in a shredder. That's my sense of what, if you believe that voter suppression is that strong and you think voter ID prevents people from voting, then why do you even believe the polls? Right? And then if you're a Republican and you believe the polls, but you think that illegal immigrants are voting in massive numbers, then the polls are useless as well, because the polls don't necessarily gauge who is eligible to vote. Some of these polling agencies could be calling illegal aliens. So it's in my opinion, it's a huge waste of time. Let's keep listening here.
By the White House and the Senate Republican majority. During Trump's visit to the Senate Republican caucus lunch earlier this week on Capitol Hill, he reportedly told the senators not to rush a response. To the extent the White House has priorities in this fight, so far they seem to be payroll tax cut, corporate liability, and the expiration of expanded unemployment insurance. I'm not even against any of those, but it's clear that if those things are going to be included, then actual worker benefits also need to be included, because like I say, I don't know, covering Americans' payroll. Republican messaging has almost wholly focused.
So listen to this is Saagar and Jetty, who all of the time when he's on the Hill Rising, he is talking about how the traditional Republican Party doesn't know what they're talking about. They don't know what voters want. They are clueless. They're not listening to populists. They need to do more job programs, do more FDR type things. This is something that he says. Okay, I'm not going to bring up all the clips, but he talks a fair deal about FDR, and which is very confusing for people like me. I consider FDR to be a huge train wreck. I think FDR was a horrible president because I don't believe in this sort of populist conservatism. I believe in market economics. So in many cases, I'm being called, in many ways, not a conservative. And if you don't want to call me a conservative, I don't care. But I'm not. I think it's the height of stupidity for people to advocate on behalf of a policy based on public opinion polling from agencies like Quinnipiac that have been notoriously inaccurate. And I didn't even go through, I had a third example here before we keep going. You have this from Georgia, which was from October 27th, 2016. So we're going back to the 2016 election, which all of us would acknowledge was, the polling agencies got completely wrong. And Trump was supposed to have only a 1-point lead at the time. So, I'm going to have to type this up. So, here it is in 2016. He won the race by more than 5 points. So, this poll, which Quinnipiac released about a week and a half before that election, was about 4 points wrong. Isn't that a little strange that you would look at Quinnipiac as this super reliable polling agency and then decide, I'm going to I guess craft public policy around what this poll is saying about the president?
Focused on ending lockdowns and allowing businesses back to work. I sympathize and embrace that view. Americans were put out of work by their government. They are owed back pay, wages. Businesses are owed government support. But that is not what establishment Republicans are offering. Instead, they are saying that going back to work immediately is enough of an antidote, ignoring reams of data that show that just because we reopen the economy does not mean economic life is coming back anytime soon. To give you an example of just how scared Americans are right now, I turn right back to the Quinnipiac poll, which asked Americans how they...
he's going right back to the poll, and look at what he's going to highlight. He's going to... This is fear porn. And this is why I have made very few videos about the Wu flu. I've done my best to steer clear of because first of all, a lot of the facts were very slow in coming out, and then there was a lot of censorship and a lot of disputed suppositions that were made based on it. So yeah, I think public opinion polling is a stupid way to gauge what's the correct way to react to this.
They feel about going about certain activities regardless of whether their state remains open or not. 74% of Americans think it's unsafe to get on an airplane. 62% say it's unsafe to go on a restaurant. 50% think it's unsafe to go to a barber shop. 49% think it's unsafe to visit a clothing store. 55% say they thought it was safe to go to a workplace outside their home, but a full 39% disagreed. So there you have it. You can reopen things full bore. People will not feel safe spending money in our economy for quite some time. The consumer demand that our economy is structured around is to the tune of 70% of all GDP. It's going to make a massive hit, which means right now, only the government is a big enough and responsible entity to make up the shortfall for worker payroll, and paired with an uncapped paycheck protection program could ensure that demand escalates and eventually approaches 100%, that we won't see mass failure across America. As I see things right now, things are existential. It is exactly now, in the last month of inaction, that the public polling turned against Trump and the Senate races across America began to tighten. Now, the Trump team is correct.
Yeah, he's all about the public polling here.
That its race against Biden is going to come down to the economy. But if the GOP does not take the layup that Nancy Pelosi handed them by not acting on the payroll protection front, then they face literally electoral doom. And as I was writing this, another national poll was released by Reuters Ipsos, showing Biden at 47, Trump at 38, another 11-point deficit. There is nobody I want to see in the White House less than Joe Biden. And I especially don't want to see it paired with a Democratic Senate majority who, while among them are all generally corporate sellouts, all agree on woke cultural tokenism and will rule us certainly one way. And that's the thing, Krystal. I mean, you...
So there's a lot to react to there. He's still going according to public polling. And as Saagar and Jetty probably knows, you've had a media that's been scaremongering in the past few months. You've had a media that's spread fake stories concerning various coronavirus issues, such as the Mike Pence video where he dropped off the boxes. You've had a media that has fawned, and they've talked about it, fawned over not Chris Cuomo, but Andrew Cuomo, who's had the worst response to the crisis, and yet they're trying to bandwagon onto the media's fear porn agenda and make it seem as if, well, the polling is going to bury the GOP. So what's Saagar and Jetty's idea of the best way to respond to this? It's not. This is what FDR would have said, okay? And I hate FDR, but here's what he said.
The only thing we have to fear is fear itself.
So yeah, I am not going to buy into this fear and this idea that, well, now we need uncapped spending on the Paycheck Protection Program. Uncapped spending. If you are one of these people who has become, and this is what I think has become of Saagar and Jetty, if you're one of these people who thinks that we have this elastic money, this currency that can just survive irrespective of how much the government is spending and taking out of the treasury and diluting the currency, well then, okay, you're not a conservative anymore of any type. But these people who believe in economic populism are, in my opinion, the most shallow type of demagogues. That's the way it is. And this is, I try to be respectful of people, and I do respect Saagar and Jetty. But I am not going to respect any sort of public policy proposal that is solely based on polling from Quinnipiac and from agencies like that. And every different day, it's a different polling agency. And I want to show just a few of the predictions that were made by Krystal and Saagar back on Super Tuesday. And look, I get it that predictions are hard, but man, some of these predictions, they just show that maybe you shouldn't predict anything.
All right, guys, you know what day it is. Super Tuesday, and we've got our predictions in hand.
Oh, boy.
To reveal all that will maybe happen tonight. We'll see.
We agonized over this one.
Yeah, look, overall, I think we both expect it to be a bit of a mixed bag. Bernie will win some states, Biden will win others. I think, for me, the key swing state to look at will be Texas. That was the one that I had the hardest time deciding on, but let's just go down the list and see what we got here.
Okay, let's start with Maine. What do we think, Krystal?
I think Bernie's a favorite in Maine.
Right.
Vermont also, I think it's pretty clear Bernie will win there. Although I did see the poll that...
Okay, so let's go down them. Now, Vermont, obviously, Bernie did win. But Maine, he actually lost. So he lost Maine. So that's one and one. They're at 500 right now. Okay, let's keep going.
Those economic...
Whoops, wrong video. Here we go.
That had Bloomberg doing well in Maine. So you never know what could happen. Right. But I think Bernie pulls it off there.
Okay, so then the more important states, Virginia and North Carolina, these big delegate rich. Virginia, a place where Sanders might have had a chance, but really we've begun to see Biden kind of consolidate the support.
Yeah.
That's one of those states where Data for Progress in particular really saw him shoot up to double-digit numbers post South Carolina. The Northern Virginia consistency. It's kind of the perfect suburban
state
for Biden.
Yeah. Look, Virginia has 99 delegates
Right.
at stake. North Carolina has 110, so both pretty good hauls there. And yeah, I think those are both states where the consolidation of older African Americans
Right.
and suburban voters around Biden is going to be enough to put him over the top. Massachusetts, I think Bernie pulls off the win.
All right, so hold on. We went through Virginia and North Carolina. So you have North Carolina where they were correct, right? So that's 2 for 1. They're correct. And then you go to Virginia and another one. But that was an easy one, and they know that. Now Massachusetts.
There, especially with Warren performing so poorly in South Carolina. The Bernie folks have obviously been making a big play to win there, him campaigning directly in the state, and I think he will pull that off tonight.
Yeah, I think that's
Okay, so Massachusetts. Let's go to Massachusetts here. Okay, Biden won by 7 points. So yeah, they're, what is it now? 3-2. Okay, let's keep going.
right. I mean, Data for Progress was kind of mixed on this, but my view is that, Warren is underperforming. It's just the lack of earned media, the lack of organization over and over again. So if we're going to go in the margin, we should give it to Bernie there. I mean, you saw the crowd that he was able to draw in Massachusetts. It was absolutely huge.
13,000, Boston Common, I think were the numbers.
Right. So let's move down to the South.
Yeah, let's take a look at the South.
All right, Alabama. So I think no secret that Joe Biden's probably going to win Alabama. Significant African or older African American population there. And then Arkansas, that's another place where he has a lot of.
Okay, you got Arkansas. Hold on. So yes, Alabama and Arkansas, Joe Biden won both of those. But what's really important is that he almost won Alabama, and Bernie almost didn't even register as viable. He got 16.5%. If he would have gotten 15% or less, if he would have gotten less than 15%, he would have been done. He would have been completely shut out in Alabama. In Arkansas, he also lost by a significant margin, not quite as bad.
Natural strength. Tennessee,
So their record right now is 5-2.
These are all kind of communities with a little bit more of a suburban, older, conservative base. But we shouldn't, discount, like you were talking about. Sanders has very high numbers in Tennessee because of Appalachia, because of, there's like a populist, strong support there. People who have Trump and Bernie crossover. So you shouldn't underwrite that significantly.
Yeah, and also,
So now they're trying to say, well, there's this big Appalachian support for Bernie Sanders over in, over in Tennessee. But that's not the way it happened. Now, for some reason, I have Texas first here. But here's the result from Tennessee. And you can actually see the polling had Bernie Sanders at 27%, only about 4% less than Biden, and pretty close to him. But in reality, he got completely swamped. He won maybe, what is it? If you look at this map down here, he won 4 counties in the entire state of Tennessee. And 2 of those counties aren't anywhere near Appalachia. They're Knox County, which is where the University of Tennessee is. And the other one, I don't even know what that little blip is over there. The ones over in Appalachia, he also won, but those were very narrow wins. Biden in some parts of the state won over 60%. That's why you can see a little bit of dark blue over here. Okay. Can't really zoom in for some reason. But the point being that they're talking about populism a lot. And populism is only effective if there's a lot of people participating. If you have a populist movement among a very select subculture of people, it's not actually a populist movement. It's more like a cult fan movement. The same as do you remember, if you grew up in the 90s, there were a lot of kids who happened to, or in every class, there was at least one kid that was talking about how Phish was the greatest band ever. And you have to go see them in concert. And you don't really get it if you don't see them live and everything. And everybody was like listening to their CD. And if they were sober, they were like, what are you talking about? This is like average jam band music. That's the type of person who is a populist Bernie Sanders supporter, or one of the, Saagar and Jetty talking about a lot of this stuff, populist crossover and everything. The populist crossover between Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump has largely, I guess, petered out. A lot of the people who are solid Bernie supporters would probably not vote for Donald Trump at this point unless they were deliberately trying to dick over the Democratic Party. And then vice versa. I think that the vast majority of Trump supporters, seeing the way that Bernie Sanders has behaved in the past 3 years, in cucking to the DNC, in going along with Russiagate, in not investigating various murders that were committed in the context of 2016 concerning people that might or might not have leaked documents. I think a lot of the people who may have crossed over from Bernie to Trump, they don't see Bernie Sanders in the same light that they saw him in 2016, and they're never going to go back. And that's why I think that these people, they think that populism is all about embracing ideals. It's not about embracing ideals only. It's also about looking at the circumstances and reacting to certain events. And the events are showing that Bernie Sanders was a complete and utter pretzel, bending himself in every which way in order to cuck for the DNC.
We're thinking about the folks in Tennessee today with the horrific tornadoes that have left a death toll there, and on a more mundane level, will certainly be impacting people's ability to get out and vote. But of those southern states, when we're looking at Virginia.
So what I also want to say is when people want to blame bad weather for bad results, you have to remember the people who did show up still voted a certain way. And in the case of Tennessee, when those tornadoes blew through eastern Tennessee, all of the counties affected, most of the counties affected, voted for Joe Biden.
North Carolina, Alabama, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas. I think Biden will win all of those southern states. The one where he actually is the closest, Bernie, is Tennessee. The other one where he could potentially pull off an upset, just because we know that the Sanders campaign has been.
So just to recap, that's not really a prediction. They're saying that Bernie's really close in Tennessee. But I showed you the result, and the result says that, okay, we can go here. Arkansas, he clearly won. Biden won by a 40-22 margin. Tennessee, he won by roughly a 41-25 margin. So it was a little less of a gap between Tennessee and Arkansas, but roughly the same result. And that's what Krystal and Saagar, I think that they generally are looking at these states as if they are, I guess, full of voting blocks. But no, people make individual decisions, and then there are people who vote according to, there's political machines and things like that. There is some degree of voter suppression, including, depending on whether you're Secretary of State or whoever's, on the Board of Elections. Yeah, there's certainly issues like that. And when I mention things like that, I am trying to use them in order to emphasize the fact that much of this polling is completely useless. Much of this polling is complete speculation, and therefore you shouldn't trust it, and you shouldn't use it as a guide.
And organizing underserved communities there is Arkansas, so I would take a look at that. But I think this will be a very good night for Joe Biden in the South on the heels of a South Carolina win. Shall we talk about Texas?
Yeah, well, first let's go to Oklahoma out of the way. Biden's probably going to win Oklahoma. All right, Texas. This one, true toss-up. True toss-up. This is, you've got a couple of things going on. So Chuck Rocha obviously has been telling us all about the Latino organizing strategy. The problem for Bernie is that this time around, Michael Bloomberg has been competing with him on Spanish language airwaves, Spanish language periodicals, etc., and he's purchased quite a bit of professional organization. At the same time, Texas is a conservative state, more naturally inclined to Biden. People forget this, but the reason that Beto was able to come so close to Ted Cruz is because it's increasingly becoming suburban. but the suburbs of Austin, suburbs of Houston, suburbs of Dallas, these are all Californians. They all make a lot of money. They have moderate politics. So those are people, natural Biden voter. That being said, the stratification, all of that, Bernie's got a decent chance, but this is the one I'm most uncertain about. And I think if Biden is to surprise anyone, he's going to win Texas tonight.
Indeed. And obviously, look, Biden predicted he's going to win Texas. They're throwing all in. That's where he had his big rally with Amy and Pete and Beto and everybody else. However, because there's a big early vote there, and because we know that the Sanders team has been incredibly organized on the ground, I think Latinos show up for Bernie to give him the win in Texas tonight. Right. Placing my bet on Chuck Rocha and the brown wall strategy that he's had in place from the very beginning. Because so far, look, we saw what happened in Nevada. They really delivered with that vote. And not just in Nevada, in Iowa, a place that had very small Latino population, that was sort of the test ground, you saw that those were the voters who were able to put Bernie over the top in terms of the popular vote. So it's a tested strategy. We've seen it bear fruits before. I think that will be the thing, combined with the early vote, that could potentially put Bernie over the top there tonight.
Right. Should we talk about Minnesota?
All right, so that's Texas, and they both predicted that Texas would go to Bernie. And in reality, the brown wall helped him, but it was only the brown wall. The rest of the entire state, except up north in Dallas County and part of the Panhandle, and what is that? I think that's like the San Marcos corridor in the middle, places where, Austin, areas like that. All of those went to Joe Biden, and he won 34% to 29%. Now, what were the polls predicting? They predicted Bernie Sanders 270 to win. The last poll before the primary predicted a 30 to 25 win by Bernie Sanders. 538, which was on March 3rd, was 28 to 25. You had so there was a swing. And yes, the polling was wrong. Joe Biden won, and he won by a significant, and people were saying, there's irregularities in the Houston area. Look at this map down here, okay? I have to enlarge it because there is no way for me to actually zoom. But you can see here that the map, I think this is like Corpus Christi area and Houston, it's all Biden. So they were complaining about voter irregularities that hurt Bernie. The voter irregularities, if anything, they kept the race close. If there were people who left because they couldn't vote, they were likely to have been voting for Joe Biden. The last race was Minnesota that they analyzed.
Let's talk about Minnesota.
I think Bernie's going to win there, right? I mean, Amy Klobuchar, internal tracking poll, had her winning Minnesota before she dropped out to endorse Biden. And now, though, she did have Sanders at a significant number 2. I think he's probably going to run away with the state. It's a natural constituency.
It's a good state for Bernie. I don't know that he's going to run away with it, but I think he has the edge there with Klobuchar out now. The path is pretty clear, and I don't know that Biden has made too much of an effort even in the state. More good states for Bernie. If you look at Utah and Colorado.
All right, so we'll get to Utah and Colorado, but no, it was that. So Amy Klobuchar won. She was supposed to win. She had a 28% to 22% margin, and Bernie was actually beating her in one poll the same day, 26 to 24. What was the actual margin? It was 38 to 29 for Joe Biden, who had been polling in fourth place at the time. So the polling is ignoring actual circumstances. The polling is not reflective. It's not reflective of the actual facts on the ground. And you can see that the poll that Bernie Sanders won with was, it was actually undercounting him. But a lot of that vote that was supposed to have gone to Amy Klobuchar directly flowed over to Joe Biden. So that's the way that these races get decided. Many people make a last-minute decision, and they decide who they're going to vote for. And you can actually see that these maps are pretty indicative. There's only a couple areas where the Bernie Sanders campaign did well. The far northwest, for whatever reason, which would be, I guess, the North Dakota border, and then the Duluth area. You can see that in the far northeast corner. And then areas along the western border. Probably, I think there might be Indian reservations there. Now, they also predicted that he would win Colorado. I believe he did win Colorado. And yeah, he won by a fair margin. And I think he did win Utah. So he won all of those western states, but they were in my opinion, Krystal and Saagar, they were buying into a lot of the hype, a lot of this notion that Bernie's ground game was going to win the election. You have to really tamp down illusions about what ground game and organization is going to do. Bernie Sanders' movement was significantly weaker in 2020. People like to say, oh, he's a populist and whatever. No. Bernie Sanders is basically this. He's analogous to the band who they have a huge following, like Iron Maiden and or Judas Priest. Let's say Judas Priest had a huge following in the 80s with one singer, with what's the guy's name, Rob Halford, and then they kicked him out and put in a different guy, and obviously some fans didn't like the new singer, right? So this is the way brands work. So you might have a core base of people who will listen to the band no matter what. And then there's a lot of fans that simply dump it and go and take an interest in something else. And that's what Bernie Sanders is. And they should not be deluded into thinking that there's a Bernie movement anymore, which is really what they keep focusing on. They keep harping on it and they make a lot of videos on it. But this video has gone on too long already. I want to invite you to go seek me out on these other platforms. You got BitChute and Library. I will upload the video to those two places as well. And please like, share, and subscribe, and follow me in all those other places. And have a great day.